Story time. Once upon a time, there lived a jester in a peaceful country. This jester was considered unserious by friends, family, and community members. This kingdom had a very good king who fostered the peace of the community and gave everyone a chance regardless of people's opinions. The king took note of the jester one day and invited him to always come to the palace to entertain in exchange for a wage so as to make good use of the skill he had. Regardless of how undermined his skills were considered by everyone else, the king gave him this chance. Surprisingly, the king enjoyed his performances and the narrative about the jester began to change positively. On different occasions, the king would generously give jester gifts, clothes, and extra money aside from the agreed wages. The king had an assistant who started getting jealous, despite having it better in life than the jester. He started having insecure thoughts that probably the jester would take his position someday. At the rate in which the king was getting fond of the jester, with bad intentions in the assistant's heart, he became cordial with the jester. Over time, he went and paid the jester a visit with different gifts. While chatting away, food was served at the jester's house and the assistant raised an alarm that the smell of that particular food was unpleasant for the king, that whoever had such a meal should not go near the palace for 3 days. That it takes that much for the king not to detect such smell from a person who has had that meal. The next day, the king requested the performance of the jester. This got the jester worried and went to consult with the assistant that it has not reached the 3 days period to stay away from the king and he doesn't know how to refuse the king's invite. The assistant was secretly happy that his plans were working out well. He told the jester that he should wear a mask for his next day's performance because it would be disrespectful to refuse the king. That disrespecting the king attracts consequences. After they went their separate ways, the assistant ran to the king while the jester went to prepare for the next day's performance. On getting to the palace, the assistant told the king that the jester has been telling everyone that the king had an unpleasant smell and he's considering not coming in close contact with the king anymore. This got the king boiling with anger, but chose to give this report about the jester a rethink before acting. The next day, the jester arrived at the palace wearing a nose and mouth mask and standing a distance from the king. The king was in shock that what he heard now seemed like the truth. The king even asked the jester to move closer, but the jester said it was better he stayed a distance for the king's safety. The king felt really offended that despite all he had done for the jester and contributed to his progress, the king decided to punish the jester after his performance. In a controlled rage, the king wrote a letter and sent the jester to take it to a destination outside of their town to claim his reward. As a way of appreciating the jester for all his entertainment over time, the king also warned this jester not to open the letter, that the people to give him the gifts are the ones to open it. The jester was so happy, thanked the king, and then ran to the assistant to thank him for warning him against harassing the king with the smell of the meal he had. That had it not been for him, he wouldn't be getting such a huge reward from out of town. The assistant became more envious and wondered how that boomeranged into a reward instead of banishment. Out of jealousy, the assistant deceived the jester that let him go and help him claim the prizes since he would be riding a horse, rather than the jester walking there, causing him more strain. The jester was so happy that the assistant really had his back and wanted the best for him, not realizing that the assistant wanted to cheat him out of his win. The assistant rode as fast as he could to the prize venue, with malicious joy. On getting to the venue, he handed the letter to the person addressed to receive the letter. Suddenly, he was bound, held captive, and on death row. The letter read, "This is the man that has disrespected the king. Give him a deserving punishment." Days passed. The assistant did not return, and the king did not request for the jester. The jester was now in confusion and decided to go to the palace. On arriving at the palace, the king was surprised to see him, especially asking after the missing assistant. The jester narrated all that transpired between him and the assistant and how he was the one that gave him the good suggestions to look out for the king's well-being by advising him to stay at a distance from the king days before. That on that note, he trusted him to go claim his prizes for him. The king was in great shock, and everything then made sense to him on the gimmicks the assistant used for both parties to make them clash. The king then narrated the role the assistant played in creating issues for the jester, and the content of the letter was to eliminate him. The jester was sad, but thankful that such fate did not befall him. The king also rejoiced with him that he did not suffer such undeserved punishments. The king promoted the jester to the position of assistant and still made him retain his position as the entertainer of the palace. This came with lots of good rewards for the jester, while the assistant lost his life. This is what jealousy and conspiracy can lead to.